Okay, so anyone who is joining right here, you already missed the beginning part of the class, but I'm picking up with recording just the part about our lessons 50 to 53 worksheet, which you should have out and you should be checking right now. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about, we're kind of working through this, and I'm going to show you, tell you other stories, show you other stuff. One of the worst kings ever in the Bible was this guy. His name was Manasseh, and he was, sadly, he was the son of a really good king, Hezekiah. There were not many good kings. I think we get to hear about both of them today. 1, 2, Hezekiah, and then the dude that's coming up later. But Manasseh was what we call a bad king. He was a king who not only put idols inside the temple, where you're supposed to be doing the worship of God, put idols there, but he also encouraged the worship of the god Moloch. And I'm going to cut the light so you can see this picture, because Moloch was a really terrible idol. Look at this picture right here. Do you see? This is the picture of the idol. What's coming out the back? Fire. So there's fire. So this is basically a furnace. And what is this person doing? Giving a child. Because Moloch was a god that was worshipped by child sacrifice. The Bible tells us that even King Manasseh's son passed through the fire, which likely means that King Manasseh offered one of his own children to Moloch as part of his. This is not the only bad thing about King Manasseh, but it just sort of caps off a pretty terrible career. He Manasseh was captured by what people? The Assyrians. That's number 2. And was taken to the city of Babylon, where he was being held. When this happened, something interesting changed. He prayed and repented and somehow got out of captivity and ended up being restored to the throne. Now, DJ, do you think it's fair that a king that was this terrible prayed, repented, and then he got to go back and be king again?
It's fair. I'm recapping on my own life right now.
You're hoping that it works? Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, if the Bible says, a lot of times Israel had this sin cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were doing evil inside of the Lord. They got captured. They prayed, got delivered, and it was like that over and over again.
Right.
And, you see many times in the Bible, David, he went into sin, and although he was punished, he still was a man after God's own heart. And you see a lot of examples of repentance. So
I get what you're saying, but I was reading this feeling like this isn't very fair, because Manasseh had done nothing good. And then when he prayed and said he was sorry and repented, he got to be king again. Where's the fairness in that? Why didn't he get destroyed? Why didn't God let somebody else be king instead of him? And I started thinking about this, and I was thinking, well, in terms of just regular world history, it's more likely that Manasseh, if he got put back into power, could quickly do some good. And I think that it wasn't because God was like, let's reward Manasseh, but more because God actually wanted something good to be done after all the bad that had happened.
Maybe it was, I don't know if Manasseh, I don't really know much of Manasseh. I don't know if when he got captured, if he got beat, whipped, probably starved, all of those things, probably almost killed.
Yes.
So.
All right. So this is, yes, go ahead, Linda.
I'm not sure if this would be accurate, but maybe he was using him as an example for others.
Yeah.
To show that even when you do horrible things, you can be changed to
Yes.
do other things really good. I don't know what's happening.
You know how DJ said, I didn't even know this guy was in the Bible. He's probably one of the most remarkable examples in the Bible of somebody who was thoroughly depraved and yet had a complete change. You know, so it's one thing if you're like, David, he was kind of always had lots some good going on. This guy had not good, there was nothing good going on. And yet he repented, and God put him back in a position of power and used him to do really good in the world. Yes. Yes. All right, number 3, Mesopotamia was 2 different groups. Of course, it was the Assyrians, but who was the other one? The Babylonians. I want you to look at this map right here because I want you to orient yourself. This water is what? What's this water? Mediterranean, which means this sea is the Black Sea, and this sea is Caspian Sea. All right, here's Egypt. Here's the Arabian Peninsula. So what's this water? The Red Sea. Have you guys been hearing about the Red Sea in the news recently? About the Houthi rebels who are blowing up boats in the Red Sea? Yeah? It's another set of terrorists. This is different from Hamas, different from Hezbollah. It's a different set of terrorists. Now, you guys, terrorists are, this is today, talking about today for a minute. Take a little break. Terrorists are very small groups that are trying to have a really big impact. So the way they're doing it is by blowing up boats. At first they said we're blowing up just Israeli boats, but they're not. They're blowing up a lot of different boats. It's causing chaos because, think of this. This Red Sea right here, if you're coming from over here, you go through the Red Sea, and there's a canal dug now so you can get through into the Mediterranean to go to Europe. But if you cannot get through the Red Sea safely, and you're coming from over here, where do you have to go? Coming from here, you want to go to Europe, where do you have to go? All the way around where? Africa. All the way down and then back up. That's a big diversion, isn't it? And it causes a lot of economic turmoil, which is why all these governments are kind of stirred about this, and America's been sending in drones to try to bomb the Houthi and all that because of what's happening right now in the Red Sea. That's a little today break. Let's go back to ancient history. All right, so of the two, this is Assyria and Babylonia. Of the two, the Assyrians were the most warlike and cruel, no freedom. They were feared all the time. See how Nineveh's in Assyria, and then you have Babylon is down here on the edge of Babylonia? Who was the prophet that God called to go to Nineveh? Jonah. When Jonah said, that's fine, I mean, I don't care. When Jonah said, no way, I'm not going to Nineveh, it's because the Assyrians were so warlike and cruel and terrible, and he didn't want to be anywhere near them. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? He was like, nothing good's gonna happen of this. And it makes it even more remarkable that they did actually listen to his preaching, and that they did make a change. And for a while, not forever, but that they had a break from the judgment God had passed on them.
So what I like about Nineveh, or the story of Jonah, is that we were recently talking about Spartans and Athenians, and I was doing research, and Nineveh was pretty much Spartan.
Yes.
Spartan culture.
Yes.
And
that's exactly right. I'm so sorry.
And so I like that we're in church. We're talking about you just have to like speak to someone, and you don't know, maybe their reaction might be bad, but if you speak to them, if you're like see someone's down or something, and you see someone like that, and if you just speak to them, you know, it'll make them like change, I guess.
It might. And in Jonah's case, since God called him to do that, there was a change.
And then,
the people miraculously, they really listened to him.
Plus,
that's
awesome. Just another way that forgiveness. Now that we're talking about forgiveness.
So the last great ruler, this is number 6. The last great ruler of Assyria was who? You got it? Looking at it? Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal, the king of this new Assyrian empire. He was the epitome of cruel, excessive force. He was the guy who was like the greatest but the last ruler of Assyria. He was to some known as the king of the world, which utterly makes sense because he was the king of the known world to them. He also, the British Museum calls him the greatest king that you've never heard of. He doesn't get a lot of time in history books, and yet in Assyria, which was the Mesopotamian region, it was a very important region, he was the greatest king that had existed. He was not supposed to be king. His his older brother got passed over by dad, and the dad picked him. Thought he was going to be a better leader and made him the king of Assyria. He gave the older brother Babylonia, which was a smaller and less important region. And this is probably, you don't have to think very hard to guess this is going to cause problems, isn't it? This right here is how, I have to turn off the lights again, how a lot of the artwork looked. It was stone on stone. So you can see right here on the right-hand side, there is Ashurbanipal. He's having, I don't know, tea or soup or something with somebody. He's got some servants here. You have, this is really cool how they do the artwork. And I think this might be like a person with just the head hanging off of the tree. It was whatever it was wrapped into his hanging out in the garden is, watch out, I am nothing to be messed with. Here's another of this magnificent stone carvings. The victor always tells the story, and he tells the story of when his brother tried to rebel against him because he was kind of tired of being bossed around by his little brother. And they went to war, and he crushed his brother. Laid siege for 2 years to a city, starved them out, and his brother died in the process. Last thing, and Sadie, you will like this, is that Ashurbanipal was a person who loved books. If you were to write on his tombstone, you would write this: warrior, scholar, empire builder, king slayer, lion hunter, librarian.
The librarian does
Librarian.
not. The librarian does not.
It's not parallel. The curator of the British Museum calls him a psychopathic bookworm. Psychopathic bookworm. Because he loved books. He collected books. It is because of Ashurbanipal that we have any record of Assyrian history. It was really significant history. But he kept and collected all the books that he could in its modern day Iraq. Do you guys recognize this tablet on the right hand side? What is it?
I don't know what
It is a cuneiform tablet. It's a really famous one. We've studied it. We've read part of it.
Oh,
I don't. Right.
I don't remember.
Hold on. I'm gonna get my history.
You don't need your history book. You just need to go back in your memory to when we talked about this. It's a story. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? The first time that we hear anything else, apart from the Bible, of there being a flood in the world. It was the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we have this tablet because Ashurbanipal preserved it. He preserved a lot of tablets. He loved being scholarly. It's a little strange for you to imagine this, but there was not this norm. It was not normal for a king to be able to read and write. That's not normally how it worked. So he was unusual for his time. He was a scholar. When he pictured himself in artwork, he would not only show himself with a shield and a sword, but he would also have a stylus, a pen in his hand, to show that he could write. He wanted to be remembered as a scholar. And his library, which, by the way, there's some chaos with the library because of all the wars that have happened in Iraq. Much of this, people have had to sort of give their lives to protect the library works. But it was Ashurbanipal who collected and preserved this library. All right. I think we're on the bottom of this page. The language of the Assyrians was
Aramaic.
Yeah, it's up here. Aramaic. The language of the Assyrians was Aramaic. And if you look right here, this is Aramaic. It's written right to left. It looks a little bit like Arabic, or any of those languages that are written right to left. Aramaic was spoken by somebody famous that you know.
Jesus.
Jesus himself. All right, I'm gonna adjust your eyes back because I want to tell you something. Probably turn to the second page. Probably the most interesting thing I learned in preparing for this lesson. Turn to the second page. Probably the most interesting thing I learned is this. The people who were incredible mathematicians were were who? Top of it, first blank. Babylonians. The Babylonians were incredible mathematicians, and Ben White, what was the base number they based their stuff on? 60. All right, let me tell you the most interesting stuff. You ready? Look up here. Why does our day have 24 hours, but each hour has 60 minutes, and each minute has 60 seconds? Where do these numbers come from? So the 60 maybe would make sense from the Babylonians, but where does the 24 come from?
If you divide.
Nope. 24 does not go into 60. No. Anybody have any idea? This is an ancient history answer. It is, well, it's something, I'm gonna tell you this, and then I'm gonna show you where it came from. The people in ancient history, we haven't talked about them in a while, but the people from whom the 24-hour thing comes, for us today, are the Egyptians. And do you recognize what this picture on the top left is? Do you recognize? Did anybody recognize it?
Protractor.
Not a protractor. A sundial. The Egyptians told time using the sun. When they did that, they divided the day. Why into 12? We don't really know. Because most ancient people did things that they could count with their fingers, or they used some way. Perhaps they used their hands and they counted their thumbs as two, because there's a bend like that in the thumb. We don't know. But the Egyptians split their day into two parts. So the base is not actually 24. What's half of 24? 12. The base of the Egyptian time was 12. 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. We retain that in our breakdown of time. We have 24 hours in our day. That's Egyptian. Now, the next thing, our minutes and our seconds, they come from where? Babylonians, because they are based on 60. So we have Egyptians for the day. Babylonians influence our hours and our minutes, 60. What else is base 60 that we still use today? Besides the minutes and seconds, what else do we use that's base 60?
Base?
The base is 60 of our minutes. The base is 60 of our hours is 60 minutes. What else do we have that's based on 60? How many degrees are in a circle?
9.
Circle, a full circle. 360. How many in half of a circle in a protractor? How many is that? 180, which is half of 360. Because 18 is half of 36. Where does this base come from? Do you guys ever feel like you're expected to remember, with math stuff, you have to remember so many different random numbers? And you have to keep up with it all? We pull together all these different ancient cultures, and we make all these different kinds of numbers the base of different stuff. So the degrees are Babylonian. You know how to count by sixes?
Yeah.
6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. That's 60, 12, 120, 180. It's a 60-degree. Degrees are done with the Babylonian thing. But most of our stuff is Arabic or Hindu. The base of most of our math stuff is what? What's our base? Most everything that you do is based off of what number? 10. We have a base 10 for almost everything else. Here's an example right here. We have, this is ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. All those are multiples of 10. And these actual digits right here are Arabic. Who's calling? They're Arabic. So right here, we have Arabic or Hindu numerals that we're using. Isn't that so interesting? I just thought that was just generally fascinating that we have this mix of all these different ancient math things as part of our stuff. All right, let's go to the last bit of this, which is number 9 on the back of this page. Manasseh's grandson, who, Zoe, his name was Josiah, was a godly king for an entire long reign. Ooh, finally somebody. Josiah, the good king. He destroyed false idols. He got rid of evil priests. And what was the thing they discovered during his reign?
Book of Law.
The Book of the Law. What is the Book of the Law? It includes what?
Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Freeze. If I said to you, hey guys, I want you to get together. I want you to stay here, stand in the middle of the room. I'm going to read to you. I'm going to start with Genesis.
Yes.
And I'm going to read all 50 books,
Yes,
all
please
50
do.
chapters.
Do that.
And then I'm going to read to you, after I finish 50 chapters of Genesis, then I'm going to read to you Exodus, the whole story of the Exodus. And then when we finish, I'm going to read to you the entirety of Leviticus, all about the sacrificial system. And then I'm going to read to you the entirety of Numbers, which will go through a bunch of genealogies and tell you like all these details. And then I'll finish it off reading you the entire book of the law, Deuteronomy, which tells you all of the laws of God. How would you feel
Great.
if you were going to listen to it all?
Awesome.
And your name's not DJ. Okay. You might get tired. Does it feel like that'd be a lot to listen to?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So you're thinking like a person who has some exposure to the Bible, but guess what? These people barely understood that God existed. They had no idea that he had spoken to them in the Bible because they had never seen it. And when Josiah read this to them, he collected them together to read it to them because there wasn't time to have scribes copy the whole thing. People couldn't really read anyway. So he collected them to read to them. And they listened to it and they said, oh, God has actually spoken to us. He's told us what he wants. He's shown us how to be close to him. He's given us instruction. They did not get tired. They were not sleepy. They were not tired. They ripped their clothes. They wept. They cried out and they said, how can we live right with God? Let's change the way we do everything. That's called revival. That's that last blank right there, number 11. A spiritual revival broke out. There were here, and you read about them in your chapters, 2 prophets who prophesied. The first one to the Assyrians. His name was, Olivia, what was it? Nahum. And I'm cutting the light, sorry again, because I want you to see this awesome picture. It was in your textbook, but this fantastic picture is of when Nineveh was finally destroyed. Nahum said Assyria is going to be destroyed by a what? By a flood. And it did not happen for like 20 or 30 years, but when it did happen, and Nahum's words came true. The other prophet at the same time was Zephaniah. He did not write to the Assyrians, he wrote to God's people in Jerusalem. And he was writing during the time of Josiah. This is a coin during the time of Josiah. Josiah, who actually met his end, both of them predicted the Lord would destroy Assyria and make Nineveh a desolation. Josiah met the end, his match, when he was fighting against Egyptian Pharaoh Necho II, and he was killed. Okay, you are done with that sheet, but I want you to add 2 things to this chart. Can you please find this chart and add to this chart Nahum and Zephaniah? Nahum was before Jeremiah. I told you I did Jeremiah out of order because I wanted to put him in at Christmas time. So Nahum's right before Jeremiah, and then Zephaniah was at roughly the same time as Jeremiah. They're sort of all on the same line. Nahum and then Zephaniah. All of this is still before the captivity of Babylon. If you look on your paper, there's a little N for Nahum, there's a Z for Zephaniah, and that's what you're adding. All this is before they were captured by Babylon, but is it starting to make sense how it was Babylon?
Oh,
Assyria, like Assyria and Babylonia were always sort of changing places in terms of which was more powerful. And after the time of Ashurbanipal, Babylonia became more powerful, and so it was Babylon, not Assyria, that ended up taking them over. Assyria took the northern side. Babylon took the southern. Yes.
I was able to guess.